Trinidad and Tobago, get ready for a musical explosion of freedom, culture, and pure steel band magic.
Featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus their talented youth bands.
Get ready for generations of steel.
The ultimate celebration of our national instrument.
Featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus their talented youth band.
Experience the power and passion of Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizens Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Fun Play. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
And hear this one. First 800 tickets sold. Admit 2 buses on 1 ticket if bought by Saturday, June 27th.
Presented by Super Panman, Dingleston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV 6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
Generations of Steel, the biggest pan event after Panorama.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the Content Capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 6861662 and start building your future.
WESN.
Good morning. I am Sean Michael Small. This is the show Talking Points. Talking Points. There can never be another point, no matter how hard they try. Now, those who see me on the face of sports may have picked up on the fact that I am a fan of a certain American football team called the New England Patriots. One of their slogans, one of the mantras by which that organization operates is very simple. It is the phrase, do your job. Because in American football, you have 11 players on each team on the field at once, and generally speaking, all 11 are engaged in every play. All 11 have an active role that, for the most part, they have to do. And the whole concept is, before you're concerned about what anybody else is doing, before you're concerned about how things are going on the overall strategy and the coaches and the other players, just focus on your job. Do your job, right? And if everybody does that, you will get success, because in theory, everybody would have accomplished their objectives, and when everybody accomplishes their objectives, the sum total is we are successful. The player works, the call works, the strategy works, the effort works. But then there was a documentary on one of the team's many successful years winning a championship, where one of the coaches pointed out the implied, unspoken part of that phrase, do your job, is do your job well. Don't just do your job mediocre. Don't just do just enough to qualify. Do your job well. Because they're competing in a sport and they are competing against other teams who in theory are also trying to do the same thing. So you need to, on some level, be better than the other guy in order to come out on top. You could beat most teams being all right, you know, depending. Maybe some of them are bad teams. You get lucky on some. But you need to be consistently good to ensure you rise to the top. Now, in other parts of life, you're not necessarily competing in terms of sport. You're not competing in terms of pride, you know, or for something benign like that. Rather, the results are far more consequential. And this whole situation with regards to the conspiracy to murder by a businessman nearing 60, I believe, his wife nearing 50, and his wife's aunt, yeah, you could really see this crew running around with some assault rifles in the car ready to gun down people, right? Yeah, that's the joke. The key thing about it is it has become an issue in the national conversation. It has become something that is being debated about. One of the things I find interesting with this situation is that the Minister of Homeland Security, now of course he's going to come out and defend the situation, but he's saying, first of all, this is not a political thing. It's not a political thing. I don't know why people think it, and I'm somewhat embarrassed by that. Why persons would think such a thing? Well, first of all, back when the UNC was in opposition, the UNC thought about these things all the time. Let's be frank now. The UNC thought about these things all the time. And it's not as though they didn't have good reason. Because he's speaking about the fact that the police are supposed to be independent to the political leadership of the country, right? Quote, that previously was a quote, this is another quote. Let me say again one more time, no government minister instruct anyone to take out a PDO for anybody. It doesn't work like that. And if that's your information, you are highly misled. Now, I do believe, I could be wrong, but is it the commissioner that declares a PDO? As far as I'm aware, it's not the TPP. So let's. Now, the issue with this is, let's not forget that the Attorney General did come out and say that we are going to go after the 1%. So when he comes out and says things like that, oh, not pushing 50, sorry, just over 50, and his wife just over 40, sorry. First of all, when your colleague comes out with any statement like that, why didn't you push back on that? Because he is declaring what? When he makes those declarations, is it a promise? Is he just passing on the word from the police? Well, if that's the case, why doesn't the Commissioner of Police make these statements? The government is going to go after white-collar criminals. This is what he says in Parliament. And again, this is just another chapter where do you all necessarily know exactly what is the message that you all are putting out? Because on one hand, you have the AG saying the government will be going after, not the TTPS, the government will be going after white-collar criminals and those who facilitate organized crime. I think the Minister of Homeland Security needs to inform the AG that, quote, no government minister can instruct anyone to take out a PDO for anybody. So that in and of itself is a reason why people think it's a political thing. But when you make statements like that in Parliament, when you grandstand in a manner that it is, I know a lot of people might not want to agree with it, but in my opinion, it is contradicting proper procedure. So now, what the minister, what he is not saying, but what he actually doesn't understand is, why are people listening to the AG, believing him, and then acting on it? Why are people listening to the AG, believing him, and then talking about it, questioning things along the lines of what the AG said? And at this point, I'm going to say it. No one ever blamed John Jeremy of being an expert communicator, in this administration at least. Campaign trail is a little bit different. You're making promises you ain't have to cash yet. Now, you're in the hot seat. But Alexander went on further to say, what I could share with you at this time, because again, the police needs to do their job. And I am one of the persons who advocate that the police must be able to do their job. And in order to do their job effectively and efficiently, they must be given that option, that opportunity to do that without all of this crosstalk and that the court of public opinion making statements. No, do your job, and let's see what goes from there. And to that, I go back to what I said with regards to my most favorite sports team of all time that gives me the kind of joy that only a true sports fan will understand. The issue is not the police doing their job, because we've seen this throughout the entire life of Talking Point, which is arguably not that old in the grand scheme of things, but it is old enough to have been on the air when Gary Griffith was commissioner, and to see the volatility that came after the whole fiasco and the subsequent fiascos. We don't really see intelligence ever work out into evidence. We don't see PDOs transition into charges and formal arrests. We see PDOs being used as holding patterns. Why? Because whether by a failure of design of the system, inadequacies in legislator, etc., procedures, policies, etc., or sheer inadequacy, whether the police are trying to do their job or not, one could argue based on the results, at least in certain sections, somehow the Special Victims Unit, they get their job done. Not so much anti-gang investigations, which then leads to the obvious criticism. For you to have the benefit of the doubt, part of what you need to do is to show the country that you can do your job well. You don't know why this is political? I don't know. Maybe the junior executive arrested her boss, and we have yet to actually hear what the potential charges were supposed to be. We've never officially even known what they were hoping to charge her for. That same officer, who has not technically accounted for that, and I know she's keeping her head down, but listen, your history is your history. If you don't want it to be used against you, that same officer went to Barbados, took a CARICOM plane on a joyride apparently, because we can't find out who, and to be fair to her, it didn't start with her. She didn't make that decision. Why is it that when the investigation seemingly is not going well, the government says, well, you know, it's not up to us, it's the police, they're independent, the DPP is independent, but yet the government loves to grandstand, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I'll say this about Hines. as much of a waste of time that he was as Minister of National Security. I don't think he technically ever did much of this type of grandstanding, saying about what he and the government is going to do and go after and who. You want us to not question you? Don't do things like shoot men with their hands up and then have a poor account or justification after the fact to give the public. It reaches the point. Now, listen, there's a part of me that understands that it's difficult being in these types of roles. It's difficult to know what to do and say in the moment. It's a lot easier to judge in hindsight. Now, that's what I want to say most of the time. The problem is then when I look at these specific situations, it's not as though I could honestly tell myself that I would make the mistake that they're making. I might make mistakes if I was in that position, but some of these mistakes seem fairly so simple, so obvious, it implies a lack of ability that is alarming. Because while I understand that the minister is frustrated that the court of public opinion is going to do what the court of public opinion is going to do, I don't understand why is it that he's seemingly somewhat, because when you say things like, I don't know why people think it, don't you have enough experience dealing with negative backlash from the public to at least understand the ebbs and flows of how these things are going to happen? But more importantly, are you willfully ignorant? Is there not an entire smorgasbord of public opinion that will tell you why they're upset with regards to the Joshua Samru shooting? And are you so wrong and strong, high and mighty, that you're not even willing to consider it? Because this is not rocket science. Yes, maybe in delicate situations, the minor details, which do matter on the effectiveness of your communication, that's where people could slip up, right? But the kind of unforced errors that I see from this government, granted, when Dr. Keith Rowley went off the rails on many a press conference, right? These are the kind of things that it's not necessary. Why are you doing it? Why are you falling into such an obvious negative pattern that you have direct experience in recent history? It doesn't go well when you go this way, right? But on some level, what I don't understand is when people in public office want to play oblivious. I don't understand. I don't know. This doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense to you. And then the question that I have to ask is, does it not make sense to you because you are not capable of understanding, because it is beyond you, because it is beyond your capabilities? And to be fair, this is not a special critique on Minister Roger Alexander. Most politicians seem to fall into this category. Somehow, they get elected into a higher office, and whatever intelligence they had to get their degree, to get their master's, or whatever level of education they reach to, right? Most of them get to some level of master's education, right? Right? Somehow, there's like a gremlin or a gnome or an elf or a troll that just sucks the intelligence out of them. You know, some small little devil on their shoulder that invisibly just sucks out all their intelligence. Or maybe some of them, you know, are potentially guilty of academic, well, let me not finish that sentence. I mean, I'm not saying that there are people with significant degrees to their name that seemingly somehow are not necessarily qualified and do not speak, act, or operate in a manner that says that they have a tertiary level education. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's interesting, the product of the education systems by which many of these people hail from, because some of them hail from some pretty significant institutions, not so? Anyway, the long and short is, this is a modern narrative that should be easy. We don't trust the greedy 1%, with the general public. We don't trust them. What? They had a conspiracy to murder somebody? Yeah, lock them up. First of all, it doesn't help that, you know, one of the people is a little old lady and the other one is a middle-aged woman. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But more importantly, there's enough recent history of the TTPS operations where you can't take it for granted that they're doing their job well. You can't even take it for granted that they're doing their job. That's the problem. We don't know if this is technically how they're supposed to be doing their job. I think it was only after somebody asked the question if they were being held under PDO that then magically a PDO appeared, was officially put out there. And Minister Alexander brings up the Director of Public Prosecutions. Why? They're not charged. Is he the one that signed off on the PDOs? Does he sign off on all the PDOs? What's going on? One of the things with this situation that the minister seemingly does not understand is there's a lack of information. There's a lack of information, and we've already suffered through multiple instances of lacks of information. And none of them make the police look good. And the difference is, in the past, he was not part of the authority by which those situations caused those individuals to be blamed. But now, as Minister of Homeland Security, he's right dead center. And what's funny is, what he doesn't appreciate is the fact that if there was anything that he disagreed his bosses doing when he was just a senior superintendent on Beyond the Tape, I don't know if you realize this, but for the most part, it's not looking as though he's doing much difference, at least from the public's perspective. So now he has to understand that the political dimension of this, whether or not the arrests are political, the political dimension of this is far more volatile than any PDO he has ever touched. Because, generally speaking, the public is willing to give the criminal justice system the benefit of the doubt that when they say we have a gangster under PDO, it's like, all right, fine, we ain't gonna question it, it's a gangster. Now, the 1% on some level, as much as people might love to bash on the so-called 1%, the problem is, first of all, the conditions that we hear them being detained under, you wouldn't wish that on anybody. And usually, the public is fine with these things because, again, we're assuming it's some hardened killer that probably killed multiple people by their own hand. Now, I'm not sure if anybody figured the people running Blue Waters are the big drug dealers of the country. Maybe, maybe not, right? Of all the Syrians they're going to start with, it's these ones. But on some level, whether it is correct or incorrect, these aren't street gangsters, right? And if you're wrong, because, again, intelligence said Brent Thomas was trying to flee. I would assume intelligence said that Ayla Edward Christopher did something. Somehow intelligence couldn't tell you what it was that she did, right? So we've reached, you always have intelligence on the gangs, but you can't arrest any gangsters. So we've reached the point in time where you're saying we're acting under intelligence. We might as well assume that you have a room full of monkeys on typewriters just randomly typing out scripts. Randomly typing out storylines to feed us to the public. What is your intelligence? What's the source? Was it in collaboration with foreign partners? Was it locally sourced? Who was the alleged target of this murder assassination plot? It's your job to know what you can say and what you can't say in order to ensure transparency so you don't have to deal with the court of public opinion. Don't blame me if you don't know how to do your job. Don't blame me if you're making the same mistakes as your predecessor. That's not my problem. Because if you're wrong, the implication is forget the 1%, forget how rich they are, forget what race they are. If you're wrong, if the intelligence can't translate the charges, what that says is for every citizen in this country, that could happen to you because it's no longer just gangsters in hotspots, right, that carry guns and sell drugs. No. Now it's going to be, oh, well, we have intelligence that you were doing something that we don't have to account to the public for. And on some level, it is harder for the public to empathize with an alleged gangster, right? Because we've seen too many of the negative outcomes. Oh, he was a good boy, he never had guns, he posed with guns the week before he was shot on social media, right? And so on and so on. And again, they are the 1%. That's supposed to come with a lot of reasons why the public might not like them or distrust them or whatever. But if you strip all of that away, and more importantly, for the average citizen, to some extent, ironically, if you think that they have power and influence and are part of some elite that is part of the corruption of the society, and this could happen to them, what about the rest of us? But more importantly, it is easier for a lot of citizens, not necessarily to see yourselves in them, but to empathize a little bit closer. They weren't caught with a shootout because it's not as though we arrest gangsters. Oh, well, you know, we got evidence and we pick them up and we arrest them. No, usually the situation with gangsters is, you know, we had a search warrant and they shot at us, so we shot at them, how convenient. And we just roll with it, right? The problem is that narrative, to some extent now, is going to be very difficult post-January the 21st or whenever Joshua Samaru was shot. And politically speaking, now it's not just going after gangsters. And yes, it is a worthy cause to go after white-collar criminals, the people at the top of the conspiracy. But no offense, all of a sudden, the police just has intelligence that they could act out on. All of a sudden. And instead of earning the trust of the people in the situation, you are demanding it. Why? It didn't work earlier this year. It didn't work at times gone by. And imagine now, because the reports are either the aunt or the wife is curled up in a fetal position, none of them have mattresses, none of them have bathroom facilities, potentially none of their pre-existing health conditions are being met, which again, these are things that I have brought up with other people, and then people will say, why are you protecting the criminals? No, because it could happen to you. That's why. Right? That's why. So we have now reached the point where I can say it's not just street gangsters being locked up anymore. It can happen to you. So the standards are not just there to protect the street hoodlums. It's to protect any and everybody that's arrested, to have a minimum level of facilities and comfort. And I know comfort sounds wrong, but essentially that's what it is, a minimum level. Because Christopher Samaru, Joshua Samaru's father, apparently, he's ill while in police custody. Could it be the stress? Could it be his age? Could it be the conditions that he's being held under? The problem is that third one, we know that the conditions in the prisons are horrible. So now, apparently, Mr. Adeed and his wife and his aunt, they're being held in police stations separately. Whatever. This whole thing just reeks of improper procedure, but I'm not a police officer to know for certain, right? Oh, case in point, notice whenever PDOs are put out, there was more information given. Now, I don't know if enough information was given this, but again, they were kind of late to even declare the whole thing about the PDOs and so forth and so forth. And now we have to ask the question again, is the state of emergency just a crutch? Because you can't do your job well. And if this does not work out, can you imagine the lawsuits? Not just for the PDO. Not just for being detained for however many days. That alone would be bad enough. We've seen that, ironically, from the last iteration of this political administration, with all of the lawsuits from the 2011 state of emergency. Now, could you imagine if someone with significantly more financial means, backed up by friends and family of a community with significant financial means, if this amounts to nothing, if no charges come out of this, if there is no conviction here, could you imagine the lawsuit here? And this is the best part, depending on the timing of the whole situation. I asked the opposition at their press conference, when will it be time for anyone to take action with regards to the state of emergency? Because let's be frank, and I've said this before, they have gone against the spirit of the law. They have gone against the spirit of the law, which then now, and they have not, again, spoken to it, accounted for it. If you wanted to extend the state of emergency past the deadline that they had, I think, at the end of January, so this will be the third extension, I believe, so we're going past 6 months, you needed a higher majority in Parliament, which they can't guarantee, so they ended the state of emergency. And then a month later, they declared a new one. So, when the opposition said we're going to be under state of emergency for the entire time of the administration, it was a case of I'll believe it when I see it, and to some extent, we've now seen it. But if this, depending on how this turns out, if this falls apart, if you plan to run the country and govern under state of emergency because you don't have a crime plan, the utterances in Parliament, in the Hansard, by the Minister of Defense, basically says that, implies that, more or less, because he and all admits that state of emergency is not a crime plan. And given the fact that you have no other plan, you have no other measure, you have no other policy, you have no crime plan. By default, you have no crime plan. I don't care what hidden tea leaves you want to try and say that you're doing, you don't have a crime plan. You're just doing the same old, because that's all you know. The whole lot of you, right? All of a sudden, I think murders in one of the divisions are back up, growing. And again, if you can't deal with crime so that it's not going to eventually climb back to where it was post-SOE, then whatever it is you're doing, it's not working. That's why you need to keep the SOEs going. But could you imagine now if a high-profile businessman of means wants to challenge this whole thing? Wants to challenge this whole thing, what's going to happen? I won't be surprised if they purposely try to string this out for as long as possible. Because heaven help them if there's a legal challenge to the state of emergency, because they wouldn't know what to do after that. And this is the unfortunate reality that we face. Because one of the things that the opposition needs to understand is their track record of the previous PNM leadership, and it is, by all accounts, previous PNM leadership. You can't just lump the current political leader of the PNM 100% with the previous political leader and his administration of the PNM. Now, we could debate, well, can't be 100%. Is it 50%, 90%, 10%? We could debate that. But if you think that Penelope Beckles was right there behind Keith Rowley whispering into his ear, yeah, do this, do this. No, that's not what it was. Remember, she was sent on exile their first term. Let's be frank now. They have internal turmoil going on. Why? Because it's not as though they saw eye to eye. So why are we assuming they saw eye to eye, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? But regardless, they have to acknowledge that their organization's track record on crime is lacking, because we saw literally nothing. Then we saw an SOE right at the end, and it did okay. It got the ball rolling on suppressing crime and dropping the murder rate, but it didn't necessarily accomplish anything past that we could say for certain how long is this going to last. Because after, when that SOE ended, you had Carnival and an election. So it's hard to say if the results would have been sustained, and probably not given what we saw this year, when the UNC's state of emergency ended, and we saw one weekend with multiple mass shootings. So people are going to want to say, well, the PNM did nothing on crime, so why are you complaining about the UNC? Well, listen, I hate to break the news to you, but just because one political entity is either bad or gets bad results doesn't automatically mean that the alternative somehow is going to be good or will get good results. You could have two failing entities at the top. I believe the reason why people don't necessarily want to acknowledge that is the fact that if they do so, they will have to come to terms to the fact that they didn't do their part in the democratic process, which I say all the time. No one wants to take it on. Well, I won't say no one, but not enough of the population wants to take it on. Well, you get what you pay for. Now, the thing about it is, and this is the truth, the minister is not necessarily wrong. We can't assume and speculate about these things out of hand. And that's what I'm supposed to be saying. But the problem is, things are supposed to be running reasonably well. And now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the thing is, it's mostly made by this current crop of leadership. Not necessarily by the DCPs, but by the people above them, commissioner on up. Because again, the SAMRU situation did not have to become such a public relations fiasco. But unfortunately, when you put people in jobs that they are not qualified for, you get these types of results. The Minister of Homeland Security is a police officer who made a name for himself in the field, not as an administrator, not as a civilian overseer, not as a public communicator. It is not surprising he's failing at these things. The Commissioner of Police, as far as we are aware, never had any serious experience with senior leadership, and by senior leadership, we're talking things like ACP, things like DCP, obviously. And because of that, he doesn't have enough experience dealing with the public. There are a lot of senior superintendents that are not great at dealing with the public. And I spent like 2.5 years or more talking about the unsuitability of his predecessor and how she was not qualified for the job, in part due to her inability to deal with the public. Now, he sounds more professional or more capable, but that doesn't mean the content of what he says is always correct. It might be technically correct, it might be legal correct, but again, you are dealing with the public. Therefore, you are dealing with the court of public opinion. It is not my fault if you don't know what you're doing. it is the fault of potentially the Police Service Commission and Parliament to approve of him, of appointing someone who does not have the leadership experience to deal with it quite at this level. Say what you want. Arguably, the DCPs under him, and maybe it's because they're not in the top job, so they don't have to deal with certain things, but they come across as knowing what they're doing better than he does at this point. And this is not the first appointment, seemingly, that this government has made that has blown up in their face, because the individual selected was young and was junior, so they bypassed people with more experience. Let's not forget the Wasi situation. It was not too long into their term, they appointed a new CEO. And they couldn't say if and where he may have had significant executive management experience. And he didn't even last half a year, as far as I remember. Maybe I'm wrong on the specific, no, definitely didn't last a year. I mean, on some level, is it just change for the sake of change? Is this attempt to go after this alleged conspiracy to murder? See, the problem is it looks like a political directive to say we need to be more aggressive. Who can we go after? Because again, the AG said the government this, and the government that, and the government will, and the government. Not the AG said the government has been in communication with the police, and the commissioner has ensured us that he's going to go after the 1%, and we have promised him all the resources and support necessary to do so. That's not what the AG said. This is at least the second or third time that senior government officials of this administration have seemingly unknowingly contradicted each other publicly. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't remember when the PNM, within the last 4 to 5 years, did something as basic and as simple as that. I can't. It probably happened, to be fair. It probably happened. But it stands out with this administration because it happened so much in such critical moments, like the Zoso legislative debate. Right? Like now, where the whole state of emergency, the legal, well, not status, the appropriateness of it, the way how it's being handled, the appropriateness of the continuations, etc., all of that is potentially in the balance depending on how this thing is handled. And at the end of the day, the court of public opinion is not fair. I've said this multiple times. It's not fair. So again, my arguments have nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of Mr. Hadid, his wife, or his wife's aunt. They could be guilty, they could be innocent. My issues have nothing to do with that. My issues are how this is being handled. Because we were already questioning the PDOs. We were already questioning their usage. We were already questioning their legality. We were already anticipating a large volume of lawsuits coming out of the PDOs for gangsters. Now, if you cannot prove that these people have done anything criminal, the liability you've put this country under, the liability you put the criminal justice system under, which already has low trust and confidence in the public. And to be fair to all of the judges, all of the lawyers, all of the members working in the judiciary, the office of the DPP, the public didn't see the DPP do something necessarily that egregious and say, it all must go. The issue stems from the start, with a shooting, and then a lack of explanation. And even the people who, like myself, try to say, don't blame the DPP. At the end of the day, the negative situation was so great, people wanted to vent their anger and frustrations, and were willing to say, just scrap everything and rebuild it from scratch. Because they've lost confidence in the entire thing. There's no benefit of the doubt for you. All of the goodwill that you have built up on beyond the tape, yes, I understand. People who support the government are still going to support Minister Alexander. That's not going to be enough. It's not. All of the goodwill built up by the public persona that was Roger Alexander is at risk of being destroyed by the public persona of now Minister Alexander. Now, another thing is, because if you want to do, and ironically, if you want to do any kind of grandstanding, you have to consider now who is going to be the one to do it, right? One of the thoughts is that certain ministers are still part of the cabinet and the administration because they're there to be the loudmouths, they're there to be the bluster, so on and so forth. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about on the level that the Prime Minister has been doing it, I'm talking on a whole different, worse level, right? They're there to be the ones that's doing the dirty work in the politicking. Fine, whatever, right? I understand that to some extent. The opposition has that too. I do not like it. I very much dislike it, but whatever. The Prime Minister, on some level, was operating in a certain manner. Not everybody liked, but at this point, if you want someone to be blusterous in Parliament, would it have been better for the Prime Minister to say these things and not the Attorney General? That way you would have the Attorney General continuing to appear to be the voice of calm and reason, so he would have the political capital to then be a counterbalance and allow the government to have a voice to give certain messages that it would be a little bit easier to accept from, and just limit the rah-rah to a couple of individuals. But we didn't do that. We had the AG now saying, we are going to go after the 1%. That's great. That's great. Someone needs to tell the AG that Minister Alexander needs to sit him down for a lesson, because apparently he is not allowed to, make determinations on PDOs, so he should be careful about saying anything that implies that. But, parliamentary privilege is a hell of a drug. And I say all that to then point out to the fact that the Prime Minister reportedly is silent on the whole situation, is not speaking about it. Why? Didn't a senior member of your administration, not just a senior member, but one of the linchpins for your election campaign? Look, we got John Jeremy, former PNM, Attorney General, served under Patrick Manning, talking about all the bad things that the previous administration is doing. Look at that. He's saying things that it implies that this situation is political. Well, at this point, why are you now acting as though we can't talk about it because this is independent to us? Why? Why? And the thing about it is, there is a difference between not saying much of anything useful, but figure out a way to diplomatically appease the situation, and not saying anything at all. The first one is annoying. The second one is telling. The first one, at times, is unsatisfying. You go up, you speak to the press. Well, look, as Prime Minister, I should not be commenting on an active police investigation, and we will continue to support. Again, if the AG said we are going to support the police in what they're doing, it would have come out a lot better than saying we are going to go, the government is going to go after the 1%. And the Prime Minister will could then say, you know, we support the police, we need to let this thing play out, and say something to the effect of, you know, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, right? And intervene insofar that the conditions of their detainment are reasonable, right? Because as government, to some extent, they potentially are liable for that, at least indirectly. And again, reiterate the fact that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. We have to trust the process, etc., 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 and not necessarily describe in detail what the charges are, what the investigation is, and all of that. But at the very least, either they or someone with them describe how this process is not potentially breaking all the rules with regards to PDOs, arrests, and the like. Because I'm not even confident that they're following proper procedure with this whole exercise, just by the way. Similar to what happened to Erla, right? Although, to be fair, the Erla situation was in many ways a lot worse. But then, you know, we just assumed, well, you know, it's not a big deal, it's not going to bother me. But no, rather the Prime Minister now all of a sudden has nothing to say. And that is, unfortunately, it's hard to prove that you're a great leader if in difficult moments you're not stepping up to the plate. Right? If you want to be the average journeyman NBA shooter that only takes the easy shots, well, that's fine. You'll be the average journeyman NBA shooter. You're not going to be remembered as one of the greatest of all time. If you want to pass the ball at critical moments, in my opinion, you never should be considered the greatest of all time. This is that game-winning shot type of moment where someone in the clutch is going to figure out, look at what the press is asking. How do I address it, not avoid it? And again, you don't have to be giving away all the secrets. But what you're doing is a combination of setting the tone, clearly defining your parameters, and managing expectations. But you have conceded all of your authority in the matter by saying nothing. You have conceded all of your influence in the court of public opinion by saying nothing. I mean, to be fair, one could argue in certain quarters you're already in a deficit with the court of public opinion, but that is also in part due to your unforced errors more than anything else. Or rather, due to the unforced errors of your subordinates more than anything else. It is times like this when you want the best of us to step up and show why they are the best of us, not to fall back down to the average, not to come back in line with the rest of the pack. It is when it's difficult that those who are truly great rise to the occasion and show why they're great. They don't say that they're great. Our politicians do a lot of yapping. Look how great I am. Look what I accomplished. Right? Or they get their subordinates to yap for them. Look how great our leader is. Look what he or she accomplished. The first this, or managed to do that, or accomplished this. Built an airport, built a hospital, built a waterfront, built a Napa. First female this. You know, everybody doubted him. Blah, 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 blah. To hell with all that. What do you do when the situation is critical? What do you do when it's critical? Dr. Heath Rowley could have had a great legacy with how he handled COVID. Couldn't stick the landing in the latter half of that. Just, he couldn't do it. Politics got in the way. Or rather, he allowed petty politics to get in the way. He allowed foolishness and corruption to get in the way. So the legacy for that will never be as great as it could have been. So you have to compensate with an airport, and that didn't turn out so well either. What is the legacy of Kamala Persaud-Bissessor? Her legacy is shaping up to be the prime minister that could not manage the country without a state of emergency. She might be the first prime minister in this country's history that has governed this country under state of emergency for more months than she has governed it without it. We just need to see how she manages this term. Because the way how she's going this term, she'll have to maintain it all the way to the end, but if she does, potentially it's going to be a 50-50 split or a minor majority of the time. And that's still a hell of a thing to say, because it's not as though we've had something close to that level of a state of emergency. We don't have another administration that operated 2/3 of the time or a quarter of the time, much less where now we're on pace to be half, if not more than half, of the time that she spent as prime minister, it's been under state of emergency. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. But I guess, you know, it's just another week here in Trinidad and Tobago. And when I try to warn people about, listen, the precedent set, the potential of the erosion of your rights and freedoms. So now we have an alleged conspiracy by members of a demographic who people will speculate and talk about, but right now it's not constructive for me to do it here. And members of the 1%, who, again, most people would love to criticize and just, you know, make jokes about. So there's a lot of the population that maybe, you know, this is closer to home, but it's not close enough yet. But this is how it goes. It goes on a progression. First, it's criminals that actually warrant PDOs. Then it's criminals who we can't actually get, so we'll use PDOs to hold them and hope that we find something. Then it's alleged conspiracies and the kingpins behind them. We can't necessarily prove it, but hey, we're on this runaway train now, and it doesn't stop. And then at what point will it be used against a much more average citizen? We don't know. We already have small groups of protesters being arrested. For what benefit, I have no idea. And then here's the next thing. Does anyone really think that the potential corrupt criminal 1% finances are only the PNM? This is one of the things I think that the current government is not considering. And this is going to be a problem. Whatever they do, and you think, oh, because they're doing it, it's righteous. Whatever they do, if it is shown to be wrong, and there's no consequence for it, then whatever they do, best expect that their political opponents will do it too. This is not just about disagreeing with the UNC. This is about disagreeing potentially with a course of action that you don't want anybody to do. Nobody. If you think the PNM are the most corrupt government, bet your bottom dollar, whatever loophole, door, exploit that one government finds, the next one will make use of it, particularly if there's any consideration that it was some kind of political targeting. We'll target you right back. We will target you right back. Clinton was targeted with a nonsense impeachment proceeding. Now, they couldn't get Bush Jr., but the Democrats did it back to Trump. And while I knew that the impeachment of Trump really was meaningless, I couldn't say, how dare they? I couldn't say that. Because the Republicans more or less did the same thing. And for me, it was a situation of, well, yeah. Now, neither side has the moral high ground when you think about it. Whatever loophole you leave open, it will be exploited by somebody else. These things are not just there at the pleasure and for the pleasure of your side alone. So consider that. Would you be comfortable if this was a PNM government doing this to someone that you perceive to be close or linked to the UNC? A businessman with ties, by the perception, generally speaking, to the UNC, because on some level now, there's some people that think, oh, maybe he's a PNM financier, whatever. Financier, not just in giving money, but maybe in the influence held on the party. Right? So if it was reversed, if it was a businessman that seemingly has no ties to the PNM, and maybe has ties to the UNC, or perceived to have ties to the UNC, and it was a PNM government doing this very thing, whatever it is, right? Making declarations that they're going after white-collar crime, and then saying on the other side of their mouth 2 minutes later, oh, but, you know, it's not up to us. It's not up to us. It's the police. It's not up to us. We didn't do it. What would you think then? If you want to turn a blind eye to the erosions of standards and principles due to convenience, we will get what we deserve at some point or another. We will. This is just going to make the whole thing even uglier, to be honest. I don't know if they realize our murder rate, as far as I'm aware, was nowhere near what El Salvador's own was. So the public is going to have limits on what they accept. Now the question is, what's going to come next? Because this situation with Mr. Hadid and his family, that, well, it's a continuation. And some people might be fine with it. But the thing is, whether or not you're fine with it, why are you assuming that it's going to end here and go no further? This is what happens when people don't have a plan. Either they're going to do very reckless things, or they're going to put us in a position where we can't trust what they're doing. And it's going to cause issues with whatever plans they do have. Either way, it's not going to be good. All right. Is the SP here? All right. He should be coming in soon. Let me switch gears into another story. Or well, rather, let's take commentary on Gary Griffin has brought up some of my concerns, maybe in a better way, maybe in a different way, saying that the detention of Mr. Hadid, his wife, and relatives will set a precedent, or can set a precedent. Let me rephrase it this way, because I think this is his intention. Can set a precedent where police can detain someone without just cause while abusing certain emergency powers to spite others. As of a media report has suggested the couple were detained as part of an alleged plot to assassinate the Prime Minister and senior members of the government. That has not been, as far as I'm aware, confirmed by the government. And then there's a question with regards to the nature of the investigation and so forth. The reason surrounding the incident was vague, warning that, and he warns, arresting someone on the basis of suspicion alone would affect the perception of the TTPS, allowing some people in authority to victimize others with whom they have personal grievances. Yes, because you might not officially be able to tell the police what to do, but you might have conversations where you influence members of the police executive in what to do. And that's saying it lightly. There are people who believe that political influence on the police is much greater than the Minister of Homeland Security would like to admit. In which case then, depending on your opinions, you may judge his statements to various degrees of sincerity. Let's take the comments. Let's take them one time if we can. Or we're not ready to do so? All right, hold off on that. Now, he goes on to say, and these are some hard-hitting quotes, and I would just like to point out that Gary Griffith was a politician that served as Minister of Homeland Security and was an Army captain. And what bothers me, he doesn't bother me. What bothers me is someone with his background, which is technically not a police background, seemingly understands the job of the police better than the people with the police background. Now, here's the thing. Sean, how could you say that? You're right. Maybe the Commissioner and the Minister of Security are fully aware of what they're doing and what they're saying, in which case that means that this is intentional. And then there are certain ethical questions that I would have for them. Here's another quote from Gary Griffith. It's a concern that the most fundamental right can be lost by one person just not liking you, or their blood don't take to you, and that person now can lose their freedom on the basis of a PDO. Because we don't know what the standards of a PDO for. The standards of a PDO are not necessarily evidence. And to some extent, he's right. You might not like how he's putting it. But essentially, the way how he's putting it conveys the ugly truth of the matter. You might disagree, oh, they're not doing it just because you don't like them. Yes, but the point is, you can't prove that they're not, because the standards of a PDO, they're not meant to hold up, because we're not meant to be under state of emergency for so long. We're not meant to be governed under state of emergency. We're not meant for state of emergency to be used like such a crutch for so long. We're not meant for emergency powers to be the norm. Think about it. Emergency powers are for emergencies. And if you need emergency powers to conduct investigations, while not fixing the system, but going out and presenting all kind of rubbish legislation to the public that will not fix the system. So saying fix any problem. So says just a different type of band-aid. Let's be frank now. No one ever blamed politicians for being good at their job. Right? The PDO gives the state the authority to incarcerate somebody throughout the period of a state of emergency without evidence to charge. So your most fundamental rights have been infringed. It is what it is. We were just fine turning a blind eye to potential injustice. And again, it doesn't matter if an alleged gangster is guilty or innocent. That is irrelevant whether or not their treatment is one that is just or unjust. Quote, yesterday it was Dominic Khalid, and tomorrow it could be any citizen in this country, and everyone is staying quiet because they are fearful that it could be them. Now, to be fair, this was also happening under the PNM, but the flavor was different. The severity was different. The stakes, to some extent, was different. I mean, let me put it another way. How is it that as a government, you're going to take the exercise, potentially? They haven't given us much detail, so I don't know if this is them going after the 1%. But how is it that you're going to potentially be the government that is going now after a significant member of the business community, thereby potentially going after the 1%? And somehow you mess it up so bad from the jump that you already have negative commentary. I mean, literally, what we've been saying, the public, at all levels, criminologists, economists, political analysts, Joe Public, man on the street, Citygate, taxi stand, rum shop, all levels of society. Nobody ever goes after the big fish. And now when potentially, allegedly, let's just assume for this argument that this is a potential big fish. How do you mess it up that you lose public support? Not all, but enough off the jump. How do you mess this up so badly? Something that the public wants to see done, you can't even do that right for like a week. How do you manage that level of ineptitude? To be fair, it's not as though y'all are unique in the level of ineptitude. Just by the way, what kind of makes this thing somewhat ironic and humorous is the fact that Senior Counsel Faris Awari apparently is their legal counsel for the Hadids. And there's a part of me, and I could be very wrong, right? But the cynical, sarcastic side of me thinks, if you're a criminal mastermind and you need a defense attorney, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would think Faris Awari would not be near the top of my list, right? I don't know if I needed a serious criminal defense lawyer. There probably, I would know, I assume, I know of a couple, right? But I assume that they would know a lot more options than just Faris Awari. Because speaking of ineptitude, his time as Attorney General, it wasn't technically the worst, but that wasn't because he wasn't trying. Rather, it was because someone was more successful than him at being the worst. John Jeremy ain't that bad yet, to be fair. He ain't reached that level. He ain't gone in a Miami court and potentially perjured himself his first few months at the job. Right? Now, retired DCP Jason Ford says police investigations were generally guided by valid information and could not be initiated on the basis of personal whims, as processes were in place to ensure police activities were held to a certain standard of accountability, except when a state of emergency. That's number one. Number two, he said it himself, generally guided. Number three, somebody tell me exactly what was the valid information that led to the arrest of earlier with Christopher, sitting Commissioner of Police at the time. What was the valid information that led to the illegal removal of Brent Thomas from Barbados? Generally, sure, I will accept generally. Generally implies that there's room for exceptions. Transparency guards you against suspicion that this is one of those times that are an exception. Mr. Ford also disagrees with Gary on whether the reputation of the TPS could be perceived poorly if they don't secure conviction against the Hadids, noting that officers had nothing to fear once they conducted the investigation professionally and with due diligence. And the problem is, again, he is assuming that the Officers are conducting the investigation with professionalism and due diligence, but more importantly, and this is where he himself might not realize, the public needs to agree that the investigation was conducted professionally and with due diligence. Otherwise, the public will perceive the results of this situation negatively if it doesn't lead to a conviction. All right, I guess here's our DCP that he himself might not fully understand the court of public opinion. It is not fair. And I understand running afoul to the court of public opinion once, twice, but to literally just continuously operate with a lack of awareness is unfathomable to me. Because in theory, these guys are supposed to be brilliant. These girls are supposed to be brilliant. These people are supposed to be the best of us, at least the best that we could have selected in the moment. Just because you found the PNM wanting doesn't magically mean the UNC are going to be magically better. And I'm tired. Well, first of all, I'm kind of confused why I even have to say that. How many people knew this going into the election? That's why Mr. San Fernando said he didn't want to vote for anybody. And if you disagreed with it, why didn't you call and say, Mr. San Fernando, you're wrong? I agreed with it. That's why I didn't have anything to say against that. I didn't. And when I said anything that agreed with, I said to them, why didn't anybody call in and say I disagree because X, Y, and Z? Because you couldn't. So we knew going in, the expectations was different side of the same coin. Anyway, let's take that break. The ESP is here. We're out of time. When we're right back, we'll hear from the TTPS. Maybe it's not about this. If it's not, please don't get upset. When we come back after this, stay tuned.
Trinidad and Tobago, get ready for a musical explosion of freedom, culture, and pure steel band magic.
Featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus their talented youth bands.
Get ready for generations of steel.
The ultimate celebration of our national instrument.
Featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus the talented youth band.
Experience the power and passion of Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizens Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Fun Play. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
And hear this one. First 800 tickets sold. Admit 2 buses on 1 ticket if bought by Saturday, June 27th.
Presented by Super Panman, Dane Gulston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV 6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
Generations of Steel, the biggest pan event after Panorama.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
You'd be surprised, a lot of the patients who present to us with infection in their feet, the infection would have started several days before. Now, the interesting thing is, neuropathy usually goes hand in hand with peripheral arterial disease. So these patients lose the sensation to feel. Now, they may have the ability to have crude touch or general sensation, but that fine sensation, for instance, when a needle sticks them or a thumbtack sticks them, they will lose that sensation.
Correct.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2, match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3, search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins Real Estate Agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Trinidad and Tobago, get ready for a musical explosion of freedom, culture, and pure steel band magic.
Featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus their talented youth bands.
Get ready for Generations of Steel,
The ultimate celebration of our national instrument.
featuring 5 of the nation's super bands, plus their talented youth band.
Experience the power and passion of Desperados,
Shell Invaders,
Massey Trinidad All-Stars,
First Citizens Supernovas,
and the pride of the South, Fun Play. Saturday, July 11th.
at the iconic Grandstand, Queen's Park, Savannah.
And hear this one. First 800 tickets sold. Admit 2 buses on 1 ticket if bought by Saturday, June 27th.
Presented by Super Panman, Dane Gulston and Friends.
Supported by CCNTV6, The Express Newspaper, and I-95.5 FM.
Generations of Steel, the biggest pan event after Panorama.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
And we're back here talking about WSND Contact Cable. Sean Michael Small, I know it's late, but we are still happy to have him. And I will say this, as I said last week, because obviously there is a controversial story, right? Now notice, I did not speak about the merits of any potential case. I didn't speculate on the innocence or guilt. I spoke about all the stuff that's been handled around it. And these are things that the media ambassador technically can't do because, you know, that's speaking for people who he is not. And we should not necessarily expect him to have to do so. Just remember that when you call in, don't lump all the blame on him. He didn't make the decisions one way or the other. Acting SP Christopher Arun, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sean. Good to see your viewers and your colleagues. My apologies for being late, but you know, I had some duties to attend to this morning, and it kept me back.
Yes. You have an actual day job.
Yes.
He is not. We don't pay him to be here. His income is not being here. His income is going out and doing the job of the.
To come? No. Maybe a cup of coffee. Yeah. I
mean, that we can maybe do that.
Yeah.
Speak to your boy. He makes a good cup of coffee.
He does. Yeah.
So
the topic today, it's concerning neighborhood watches. You know, target hardening, community. So the neighborhood watch groups are basically neighborhood defense mechanisms that you can put in place to ensure that your neighborhood is safe, because community safety is basically, and defense is separate from neighborhood defense. Right? So you have communities, you have international communities, you have national communities, you have regional communities, you have micro communities, you have different types of communities. You might actually be going, let me say for instance, you might be going to a school in Marval, but you belong to Sangre Grande. But so the school in Marval becomes part of your community because you are going to school there, your children are going to school there, so you have interest there. You might attend a PTA there. So our community is basically separate from our neighborhood to some extent. And the different mechanisms you put in place when you're talking about crime fighting, crime prevention measures in those two different categories. So crime prevention and community might be like involving different institutions to assist that community that belongs to other neighborhoods, as opposed to a neighborhood watch, which is really basically you're looking out for each neighbor. So you might have a neighbor that doesn't have CCTV cameras, so you might aim your CCTV cameras around their property as well and whatnot, and you might look out for them. You know, you might know the time when they come in and go in, and you may not see them, and you call them to find out if everything's okay. You know, it might be a missing person, you never know. So this is where neighborhood watches come in.
Because part of having your own CCTV system, at least, you know, depending, your neighbors might not like, hey, what you're recording me for.
But it's not illegal in Trinidad to point your cameras.
But more importantly, if you come together as a neighbor to watch, then you could discuss it and say, well, you know, so we'll capture this part of your lawn or whatever. You know, maybe not point your camera to your neighbor's bedroom window.
No, well, you shouldn't do that.
You shouldn't do that. But you know what I mean? But like even just capturing the street.
Yeah, the street.
So that you have a record of who comes up and down the street, right? That is still an assistance to the neighborhood because then, you know, at the very least you have that record.
So like my neighbor has CCTV cameras, and I picked up a guy cleaning the road from the corporation, and he was using the what do they call that, waka?
Weed waka.
Yeah, waka is a brand, but okay. So nonetheless, and the stone hit my vehicle's back glass and smashed it. I haven't been compensated up to now, but nonetheless. Yeah. That was years ago. So the footage assisted in, you know, we were able to take still shots and take it to the corporation, and, you know, they're doing their investigation and whatnot.
And I guess situations like this, because while people are saying, well, I thought you said crime was down, blah, 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 but one of the things the police have gone on is the various heads of the districts yes, these crimes might be down, but they've also put out warnings. Hey, certain crimes are up, and it will vary from area to area. You know, one time it's murders, but more often than not these days, it would be other crimes like maybe home invasions or burglary, stuff like that.
Right. So you saw a move from the 80s and the 90s where you got a lot of break-ins for TVs, VCRs, and whatnot, jewelry.
I could attest to that. The one time we were broken into, it was in the 80s, and they cleaned us out, and then we went from having a quaint little house to burglar-proof and everywhere.
Right, and then now you see the shift to home invasions. So home invasion seems to be a lot more profitable than the break-ins because now you have to offload those TVs, and then you had to offload the VCRs and TVs. You take a TV now, you may not get it sold as easily as in the 80s and the 90s. So now nobody buys a used TV, nobody buys a VCR, nobody buys a DVD player.
Especially
everything's streamed online.
Maybe a few years ago, flat screens might have been expensive, maybe. Right? But now it's relatively cheap.
Yeah, you could get a cheap TV, and then you could go to a store and you take it out on terms, and you get a better TV.
The main difference in a home invasion and a burglary, this is my layman's brain, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's when you're in the house and they come into the house.
So so when they do that, they are able to pinpoint where the cash, jewelry, cigarettes, whatever they're looking for.
Right.
Alcohol.
Quicker, more liquid.
Accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for some reason, and it tends, based on what we're seeing, they seem to know that you have cash in your home.
Right.
And that's one of the things persons should not allow other persons, you shouldn't allow other persons to know your business.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was talking to a maxi driver, a maxi owner, and he was like, listen, nobody knows how much maxis I have, except my son, his child. And he was like, I said, okay, how come? He said, well, because people are protecting myself.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want too much. He said, nobody else. He said, even his drivers doesn't know that the amount of other drivers he has.
Well, because it's a cash business,
It's a cash business.
So if he has, say, 6 maxis,
Yeah,
somebody's going to do the math every day. He has this amount of cash.
Right.
He has to, and then depending on when he collects the cash now, if it's too late to bank.
Right, and he has other businesses.
Well, there you go.
He has other businesses. So, you know, I was talking to him about the safety measures to put in place to convey the cash. You know, he wants to take his own chances. I was like, no. You know, see if you can employ some type of security or police or whoever, extra duty, to assist you, you know, in monitoring your business and whatnot, and helping you with that movement of cash and whatnot.
Yeah, I'll say this, you know, I never had to deal with large amounts of cash, so I just get nervous with like small amounts of cash. I could only imagine, because I know that there are some businesses which, you know, they're on the same level of, say, my family's business, but they deal with a lot more cash, to the point where I'm like, I don't understand how you function.
And why take it home? Why take home 100,000 or 40,000?
Or it could be like Senator Naked,
right?
Where you do errands with the cash.
Don't put your cash in your vehicle. I've done investigations where the perpetrators, I was able to look at CCTV footage in the bank, where the perpetrators, we observed them in the line.
Right. It's not
in
the
bank. That's not the teller. It's the bank. They are in the bank. They are in the line. They pretend they're going to do some legitimate transaction. And I saw where they were looking at, you had to look at him to know that he was doing that. And you could see that he was looking at the persons as they went up to the teller, and he was in the line. And we followed him. He went outside. His colleague was in the vehicle outside, and then they followed the victims, because multiple victims on different days. And they followed them, and then they hit them from behind. So when the persons came out to attend to the accident, they held them up and took their cash.
And the thing is, you might think, oh, well, I'll just go home. It's no.
You should not be conveying that type of cash. I think we need to, I'm hoping that the day comes, when we move away from cash to cashless.
Because the thing is, that's the thing with the home invasions.
Yeah.
On some level, it's not like the burglaries of before, where you're depending on the physical things that you could lift, the big expensive electronics and whatever else. It's a lot of, again, jewelry, cash, right? And you know, to some extent, the more they know about your business. But the sad part is they might not know about your wife's jewelry,
No.
But they can learn, hey, he was in the bank.
Right.
And because that's what happened to a senator. That happens. We don't know. I don't know if it actually happens every day, but for all intents and purposes, you could say it happens every day.
You know, well, for all we know, but for
in a very generalized sense.
Yeah. And it happens more often than, you know, and maybe not everybody makes the reports. You know, there was there's a guy that sells doubles. He was kidnapped and they paid the ransom. I think it was about $4,000 or whatnot. And yeah, that's how little they go after.
Which is scary because
it is scary,
if you didn't pay the $4,000, would you kill him for $4,000?
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, it's possible. And you have to treat a kidnapping like a potential murder because you know it could happen. You know, and that's you don't know what somebody getting kidnapped for. It could be for ransom, it could be for murder, it could be to cause bodily injury or harm. You know, we don't know. So when we exercise our policing strategies to save the kidnappee, the person being kidnapped, you know, we have to use as much force as is necessary within the policy to save that person's life. Because we don't know what you kidnap them for. For all we know, you're going to kill them, and you know we need to rescue them.
Yeah, who would have thought you're doing this for a ransom of $4,000? Because even though you said doubles, man, the irony is, you know, if it's some big corporation, you're not expecting them to be conducting everything in cash.
Yeah.
Right? But if it's somebody like a street vendor or a small retail outlet, right? Depending, right? They potentially could have a lot of cash on their hands.
Yeah, and he wasn't kidnapped from work or home. He was kidnapped lineman.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but kidnapping is one of those things, I think, where it ebbs and flows, it trends and then it declines.
Yeah.
But one of the areas where you can pick up someone is not necessarily you'll do a whole home invasion to snatch them out of the house, but hey, they're coming home, you're coming out the car. And this is going to be in the sphere of your cameras, your neighborhood watch, the observations of whatever your neighbor has in place. But this is also where you're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you're not inside the house yet, and you're not, you know, you have to get out of the vehicle, and that transition is, unfortunately, where a lot of things could happen.
Yeah, so neighborhood watches bring some sense of security to you as an individual in a neighborhood. We talk about target hardening, making sure you have proper locks, burglar proofing, lighting. Like yesterday I saw one of my colleagues, he bought some solar lights. So the solar lights, it's dusted on. So when it gets dark, so it absorbs the solar energy all day, and at night it comes on. And it doesn't require any wiring or anything, just installing, just screwing it to the roof or the ceiling or the wall.
Or they even have, I think, ones that just go in the ground.
Yeah, and it's an excellent form of lighting. You could utilize that. You have the alarms. You know, you should have these alarms that would let people know that something is happening at your home. So if there's a break-in or some home invasion or something, that you could press a panic alarm and it goes off. It goes to the security company, and it also alerts persons in the community, the neighborhood, that listen, something is going on.
Well, the one thing about alarms, because in my area, there are not a lot of alarms that go off.
Right.
And I think my assumption is maybe it was a small business in the area. And when it goes off, like, it's like a car alarm, right? You're kind of like, eh.
Right.
But what I do find, because we assume it's tripped off by some kind of sensor or something, right?
Yeah.
But what I do find is effective and potentially distressing, because I think at times, maybe a little bit more now than, say, a couple of years ago. I mean, COVID did cause a lot of people to have to, like, stay home and not move about, right? Is the air horn, and we spoke about this before.
Yeah.
Right? Because the thing with the air horn is, it's a human saying, hey, something's wrong.
Right.
Right?
It's a lot louder.
And it's an active. So it's not just, oh, the cat tripped the alarm.
Yeah.
You know, the lizard climbed into the building, tripped the alarm. Now it's a human saying, oh, alarm, neighborhood alarm. Right? And then now, every time that happens, my only thing is, can I say anything? Do I need to blow too to spread the word? Because if it's not, I don't want to. I'll be honest, there have been a few days where I'm like, ooh, another one. What's going on? But it's not necessarily like right next to me, so I can't see anything just yet. But it's one of those things where, you know, I can't discount it.
Right, and one of the things you want to do as well is, if you have walls or hedges or grass in it, you want to make sure your properties are a lot cleaner. so persons could see if anybody's in your property.
Yeah.
You know, lighting is very important. You know, we're still seeing. I think I told you I went to Blanchisseuse the other day. There was almost enough and adequate lighting along and then some of the properties had no lighting at all. So if there was somebody in the yard interfering with your car, as a police patrol, we weren't able to see that.
One of the scariest things, and this is not meant to throw the current government under the bus, because I think this is something that's been persistent. I don't know if we spoke about this when you mentioned Blanchisseuse. Was it the street lights in Blanchisseuse?
Yeah.
Right. So similar thing. We did speak about this, and I guess to what extent now, again, do we have to talk to the public and say, you know, yes, it is more money out of your pocket, but if a stretch of your street doesn't have street lights, that darkness could be an issue.
Yeah, it's a potential risk. You know, you don't want anybody sneaking in your property and you can't see them. I think, so like 2 o'clock this morning I was up and I ensured that all the lights were off inside as opposed to outside, because I was hearing some noises outside. It was just my neighbor next door, and but you know, the dogs were barking, so I came out to see, but I made sure all the lights were off inside, so nobody could see me inside.
But one of the things too, this might seem obvious, but I don't think necessarily everybody considers this. Yeah, you might want to have your windows, your curtains drawn and your windows open when you're at home, but at the very least when you're leaving home.
Yeah, make sure and lock up.
Not just to lock up.
When you're going to sleep.
Close your curtains.
Yeah.
Because potentially someone could come in and look into your house and say, "Ooh, they have this, ooh, they have that."
Correct,
right? And then start to add up, well, okay, you know, and again, maybe they're not after the TV, but still, the more stuff you have, the more of a potential target you might.
And they're looking at weaknesses in your structure as well.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when I was working, I used to work high-low, when Massey was high-low. And I remember one day I was replenishing some stuff in the freezer. And
this is when you were real young?
Yeah, really young. I was just out of school.
I'm like, when did you have time to have this whole other career?
So, one of the things that happened, the store had alarms, motion sensors.
Right.
Right, but so I'm looking at the freezer and I'm seeing a light. I'm seeing light emanating from through the roof. No, this is not possible because there's a roof over me.
Yeah, and it's a freezer,
yeah. So when I saw the light on the ground, and I was like, this is not the regular light, this is sunlight. This is not, and it happened that they had cut a hole in the roof and were probably waiting until night to come in. And we were able to...
so they didn't come in yet?
No, they were just building up to that.
So it's not like they had like a 4 foot by 4 foot hole. It was more like the cuts and the cracks.
Yeah.
And you're seeing coming through these small gaps.
In,
Right.
So I mean, yes, alarms could work and can work, but you know, they also look for weaknesses in the structure of the property.
One of the crazy things though is that as much as you say they might not necessarily take appliances and the like, the flip side is there are times when you see reports on robberies where it's all kind of random stuff that they take.
Yeah.
If they think whether they, because I guess, is it correct to say sometimes they're not necessarily certain if they could fence it. Right. They'll just take it first and try and sort it out later.
Right. So one of the things you see they're taking a lot of is in your yard, from your yard. So your ladders, your hoses, your bicycles. So they take those because those might be easy to get rid of, to sell to potential buyers.
The funny thing is the smaller money stuff might be easier to move.
Easier to move, yeah. And then, I mean, the bicycles, anybody buys a bicycle now. So we have, we're seeing like, you know, persons now coming into the country who are not of well means, purchasing bicycles and this kind of stuff. So they steal those. What the police does, when you make a report, it's very important that you could possibly provide a picture of any of the items that you have in your home and serial numbers. So what the officer does is when they follow the forms, there's sections that have numbers on it where we provide identification for properties stolen. And these get placed into a database.
Right.
So if, for instance, an officer stops somebody for whatever suspicious or reasonable reason and inquires into the property they have, potentially, because, okay, so like I arrested a guy coming down St. Anne's when I was in my younger days, 2 o'clock in the morning, we're on patrol in St. Anne's. So there's this guy walking down the street with a bag of cement on his shoulder.
At 2 a.m.
At 2 a.m. We get it. I can't remember what he told me. And I arrested him, charged him for. I remember in those days the offense was what by. I can't remember the offense.
Well, basically for
possession
theft.
of for possible theft. It amounts to theft. So well, I charged him, and he went before the court. The court found him guilty. He was remanded to custody for jail term, and they disposed of the semen. The court would have disposed of the semen. And the thing is, for me to have tracked that bag of semen, somebody would have had to know unlawful possession. So this is the name of the offense, unlawful possession.
Right.
This is where I can't prove who's the owner. If I can prove who's the owner, then it will be theft. Larceny. In Trinidad is larceny. In England is theft. So we were unable to prove who was the owner. So we looked around. It's St. Anne's. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's out. You know, potentially it could be anybody. So we charged him. I charged him for unlawful possession. Took him before the court. And the thing is, when the officers follow the forms, if you are able to provide some type of identification, when another officer stops somebody, so they stop somebody, hey, we get a bicycle, you know, how you have this bicycle? It is legitimate questions. They may stop them in the middle of the night, they may search them, they may question them, of course.
I mean, you know, a lot of people were like, why are you asking me if this is my bicycle?
So what the officer would do, if there's a serial number on the bicycle or a particular descriptions that you may have etched on your own bicycle, not just the brand, but even the brand, they are able to check the database to see if there's any stolen bicycles or material or items, even as sunglasses.
But also, say, you know, someone stole your bicycle from your yard. Some people might say, well, I don't want to report it.
Right, they report it.
They don't want to do it,
Right.
but you should, because potentially, if a neighborhood seemingly has a certain vulnerability, you need to report it, because in case now they come back, they go to the next neighbor's yard, and the next neighbor's yard, and the police need, the more of a record the police have, the better the situation is for them to deal with it, for you all to deal with it, right?
So you may, exactly. So you may not see it as something
that you didn't care about.
Right, but it does help the neighborhood protect itself, because it informs the neighborhood. And one of the things you could probably do if you have a neighborhood watch is also you may have a WhatsApp group or some kind of other social media group that you could use to inform other persons in the neighborhood. Well, look, this is what happened in the neighborhood. You understand? So, like, I remember there was an occasion where the neighborhood I live in, somebody had gotten robbed at gunpoint. Just a guy on a bike riding around, and he held up a gentleman who was working in the community, and he just happened to be walking through the street, and they held him up and they robbed him and whatnot. And what that did is it invoked the entire neighborhood, the street, to start looking out for this bicycle guy. And we were able to inform the police station nearby, and they held some potential suspects. I don't know what went on with the case though. But you know, it alerted everybody that, listen, there's a gentleman on a bicycle riding around, robbing people at gunpoint.
Now, before we close, and this might not necessarily be the normal parts that you would speak about, but one of the things, because you know, WhatsApp, social media, people share things. And the assumption is on the neighborhood watchers, this happened here. Matter of fact, just get the word out, done. Now, I have never necessarily been in a WhatsApp group to say some corporate entity, so I don't know how that might work. But the WhatsApp groups I've been a part of, even if for the most part, maybe not for the station, I can't really say this about the station too much, right? But in other areas where we form a group for a purpose, so this is technically a non-professional group. And a neighborhood watch is technically a non-professional group.
It is,
Sometimes that purpose kind of gets forgotten. Oh, we're just talking about ourselves, or you're sharing, like, my mother shared me a report about something that happened about robbing on a highway, or probably an incident that happened maybe last week where they managed to stop a car or something, right? Now she sent this the key thing is she sent this to me yesterday when I was in the East. So I thought she's sending me something that happened that day that I need to be aware of, you know, something, right? But it's all news, right? And so, you know, like a combination of you're kind of using this group meant for a purpose, maybe as a personal chat group, or maybe you have somebody that might be a little, I don't know, maybe too much of a busybody, right? And then the point is, if you kind of put all of this extra stuff that is maybe not necessarily to do with neighborhood watch, people start to kind of take the neighborhood watch and the neighborhood watch chat for granted. Right. And then you're not taking it seriously, you're not paying attention, you can't, or maybe you want to pay attention, but you can't sort out, well, what is the actual stuff about the neighborhood compared to, oh, look at what crime going on in Tobago. We don't live in Tobago. We could talk about that when we see each other. We could talk somewhere else, but did something happen here?
Yeah, I think Trinidadians sometimes are not serious enough, but nonetheless, they are not alert enough. I remember going to a home in Westmoreland. We had to arrest a suspect for sexual penetration. And we went to the home. He's a security officer working in this home in Westmoreland.
This is our old folks?
No.
Children's?
Children, yeah. So we went there to arrest him, and I pressed the bell, and the maid, who I found out was the maid after, because the place is properly well fortified next to the sea, you know, and it's a well-built-up home and everything. A well-built-up community. And the person I found out was the maid after. She was, yeah, okay. I said, good day, you know, I'm a police officer. I'd like to speak to the person in charge of the home or the owner, please. You know, I had my badge and everything. And the maid opened the door, the gate. And I was like, and they have security.
Right.
They actually have on-site security. And we went there to, and so we were potentially, so the gate is wide open. And we potentially could have just walked in. She never verified that we were police officers.
Right.
So we stayed outside because, I mean, although we came to arrest somebody, we didn't have a warrant to enter the premises. So we stayed by the gate until the head of security came and we explained what we were there for and that we came to arrest one of his colleagues. And he provided him and we left with him. But nonetheless, we aren't serious as Trinidadians.
Now, to be fair, how would she have verified your identity?
Well, one, she did not communicate with us. She was speaking a foreign language, right? And I encouraged her. I said, could you have the owner, could I speak to the owner or anybody in charge of the property, please?
You didn't ask for the gate. I mean, I did pick up on this. You didn't ask for the gate to be unlocked. No. So you're ready to wait outside, and she's like, come in, you know, and just laying out the red carpet, you know. They said they were police, you know, I surrender. Like,
you shouldn't do that. You should make sure it's police officers.
Right. If police have a warrant and they're banging on the door, that's different.
Yeah, so we were all there. I think we were in unmarked police vehicles. Because remember, when we're conveying children, we use unmarked police. So we generally work in special victims with unmarked vehicles. But we had plain clothes on, but we had our badges around our necks and whatnot. But that's not enough. You need to examine these things. You need to say, okay, hold on, let me have the person in charge of the property or the owner come to the gate.
Well, because this is the thing, like, I can't necessarily fault anyone for not knowing how to verify, but if the police are not demanding of you, if they just say, can I speak to the boss, just do that, you know?
I can't demand you open the gate without a warrant.
Yeah.
So I guess she didn't know that, but nonetheless.
Ironically, this is not necessarily a bad instance of not obeying instructions in the case where she tried to go against you. But in a way, it's like, if the police ask for something, don't do anything extra, just do that.
Yeah.
Because I guess in part, you're asking it for many specific reasons to avoid all kind of different, whether it's procedural issues or technical issues, legal issues, or, you know, safety issues.
Yeah, now we knew he was in there because we had pinpointed his location in there. So we just wanted to see him, arrest him. We didn't want to bring any embarrassment to the people in the community.
Organization, and to go into the facilities. Because I guess you're aware that it's not every day civilians see someone get arrested.
And it was not company security, it was like private security.
Right.
Personnel. It wasn't like a company that we could have gone to and said, listen, we want one of your colleagues. We've actually done that already. But in this case, there was no company. This was individuals working security at this home. Yeah.
I'm doing my best to emotionally ignore the fact of what you were there to arrest them for. I'm just, you know, because it's like, oh, the security that was there to guard the children.
And there were children on the compound.
is, in this scenario, the perpetrator of the offense against the children that he was there to guard. That's almost like the police officer being the shooter in the murder scene. You know
the victim is somebody separate from this household.
Okay.
This is
in
his community.
I mean, it's still bad enough.
Yeah.
It's still, in a way, I don't. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see that as better. You know what I mean? It really is.
Yeah, it is.
That's a very much of a technicality.
I mean, I know we're laughing, but we're not trying to make light of anything.
Yes, I'm laughing because I have to find some emotional outlets because I really don't want to contemplate.
It's so ridiculous.
That.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Tragic is not the word.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where you really wish life did not provide you the opportunities to hear these kinds of stories that are true.
And one of the points I'm trying to make, Sean, is that whether it be police or TNTech or WASA or anybody coming into your property, make sure you verify they are legitimate.
And the thing is, you're not saying that there's a scheme right now where people are dressed up as TNTech technicians, but the way how crime is going, you shouldn't be surprised if there were because I think a lot of people is like, criminals not doing that.
No,
but we're past that point, right?
Right, and one of the importance of the neighborhood watches is like, for instance, another case in the West. This home, persons went to work, went to school as usual, and technicians came in to change the air condition. And how they did change the air condition was break through the wall. So they broke through the wall to get into the property, pretending to be technicians replaced an air condition unit. At the end of the day, it was found out that these men were burglars and not actual technicians coming to change. And if somebody in the community neighborhood had recognized that, so everybody in the neighborhood thought these guys came to fix and change an air condition unit. Unknown to them, they were breaking through the wall to get into the property.
There you go.
Yeah, so. So nothing wrong with the village macro.
You see, it's a catch-22. Because 9 times out of 10, the village macro is really just being a macro, and it's not just annoying.
No.
If it was just annoying, it'd be all right, fine, just okay. But it's like it's an extra level of emotional misery that they place upon you, right? So it's a catch-22. Do we want to encourage the village macro? Well, maybe, you know, for the sake of crime fighting, we could start to tolerate it for a little bit.
We can live with it.
All right. We do have some comments to get through before we close out the show, so let's take them. Right. Continue your deep prayers, Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, here's the thing. Even if you're not a religious person, there's something about having faith that will then help you to have faith. In the sense of having faith in a higher power or having belief in a spiritual system will give you some amount of strength or maybe understanding, right, with regards to then now, look, society, our fellow man, you know, even the police, the criminal justice system. Yes, I know what I said earlier before the ASB there, but I've never said that all police are rotten. Like, we cannot just mistrust things for the sake of our emotional outlets, right? And on some level, we still have to have faith in our country and our nation and our society. And because if we don't, more and more of us will abandon it. And then how are we going to actually fix things? That is just basic human behavior. DPP must resign, followed by the COP and Sergeant Alexander. I mean, one could argue Sergeant Alexander might even Sergeant Alexander might, anyway, let me not say that. No, I'll say it. Even Sergeant Alexander might be disappointed in Minister Alexander. All right, now, should the DPP resign? I don't know why Minister Alexander brought up the DPP, but I don't think he is involved in PDOs. Is the DPP involved with preventive detention orders?
No, I don't think so. He may offer advice, but...
with regards to the ongoing investigation?
Yeah, but the ultimate decision is the minister.
Well, there you go. So I guess politicians are involved with PDOs. And then we have another comment basically pointing out facts. I'm not entirely sure what I was saying when the comment was made, so I can't attest to what he is referring to. Let's go to the next comment. States allowed the TTPS to both arrest and search without warrants under the SOE. Why then are careful efforts being made to secure lawful warrants in this case? Remember Earler's plight. I mean, there's a lot of questions. The thing is, with regards to the facts of the investigation, I can't really speak to it.
No, sorry. Under the SOE, the police are allowed to search your premises for firearms, ammunition, narcotics without a warrant.
Right.
When it comes to other investigations, like we say, I want to seize your devices, your laptop, your phone and whatnot, I would have to actually get a warrant for that.
Yeah, even with the SOE?
Yeah, even with the SOE.
Okay,
so it
go.
depends on the type of investigation. So in this case, we are hearing it's conspiracy to commit murder. So the warrants may have been to secure documents and devices and whatnot, which they would need lawful warrants to do.
Right. So, of course, I get it. People might then say guilty by association with the rest of the criminal justice system. But it is one of those things where I rarely, there's so much unknowns, and it's not even about giving the benefit of the doubt. There are times when you just can't speculate on a situation. Now, I don't like how it was handled communicatively, but I can't say, oh, these people are innocent. They should. I mean, I don't necessarily like the reports of how they're treated, but if there's an investigation, we can't just say, well, they shouldn't be investigated. Well, if we have evidence, maybe, but we ourselves now are caught between a rock and a hard place with regards to aspects of this situation. With the huge amount of calls about corruption, mismanagement, nepotism, and incompetence in all governments, past and present, and the subsequent audits, inquiries, and reviews, how is it that a PDO has not been issued for any politician? Are these threats to the public peace, health, and well-being? That's a very good question. Good day to you as well. Especially since the current government has implied a lot, just like how their predecessors implied a lot. One of the things was Gary Griffith. Politically they said, well, the things that he did. Well, what did he do? Well, we'll tell you after the local election. All right, it passed. Well, it's before the courts. We can't talk about it. So I have similar criticisms. And one of the things that is very much, you're calling your political opponents all these, they're evil, they're wicked, they're corrupt, they're this, they're that, and the other. And we see nothing. So what's going on, right? And my assumption is, if one side starts doing it to the other side, unless they're going to stay in power in perpetuity, it's only a matter of time before it's done to them. And this is the thing. For the parts of this Hadid detention, arrest that we might not like, and it might not be central to the investigation, like the conditions that they're being detained, or how some of the minor details of how they're being treated, right? Or maybe the situation with the arrest, I don't know. If there's anything to have anything to do with politics or personal emotions or what have you, we need to understand, if it could happen under one government, it could happen under another government. And even if it was hardened drug dealers, there are certain things, they should be investigated. They should be arrested. They should legally have those rights and freedoms that they forfeit due to the nature of whatever it is they do. That should be taken away from them. But how they're treated, you have to have a minimum baseline, because you never know who's going to then be subjected to these conditions. And the thing is, part of it is not necessarily the people who are doing the actual jailing, but rather it's the fault of the people doing the administrating. And that could be executive leadership, or that could be people who control the budget allocations. We have money shortages everywhere. It's not surprising we have money shortages in education and healthcare. We have serious shortages in healthcare. It's not surprising that prisons and jails and police stations also get shortchanged, right? The question is, who's actually trying to sort that out? Some of the unions have been talking about it, but we don't necessarily take it on, because we assumed, at least with regards to the conditions of the prisons and jails, well, it's only gangsters. Now it comes back potentially, maybe not just yet, but again, it could go further, where we'll see now the fares, ordinary citizens being subjected to this. One could argue this is ordinary citizens. But we don't want to spend the money, because we rather have, all the subsidies and free education that we take advantage of, gates and all of that. And maybe we need to understand we should prioritize certain things that we have allowed to fall by the wayside and maybe sacrifice other things for the sake of the benefit to all. So I believe that's the last comment. So with that said, oh, we have two more. Corpus is one of 5 extraordinary common law writs. Why would this remedy be swiftly dismissed unless jurisdiction is a factor? What is jurisdiction at play, common law or statutory law? Well, I guess I'm not a lawyer, and I'm assuming this is with regards to the action taken out by the representatives trying to kind of get a swift resolution to get their clients out of jail. And the judge, I think, is maybe trying to be more cautious. He's not necessarily looking to just assume that the investigation is out of hand. But he is proceeding with some kind of matter, right? So we'll see how that goes out. These things have been happening in Trinidad and Tobago for years within the law class. Police have been abusing their powers for decades. The law facility has said and done nothing about this. To some extent, this is true. I wouldn't necessarily say police has been I mean, yes, they are bad cops, so technically, yes, they are abusing their powers. But to me, this is more, because this is not police abuse per se, right? Or the run-of-the-mill police abuse. This has to come from somewhere higher than that, I would imagine, because of the political fallout. I very much doubt that the government was blissfully unaware. I'm not saying the government green-lighted the endeavor, but I very much doubt that the government was blissfully unaware. But more importantly, some of the things like the way how the detention facilities are reported to being, technically speaking, it's not like we've seen photos or what have you, right? I believe this comes from their lawyer. So take that for what it's worth. Yes, certain abuses by the system like that has been inflicted upon lower class individuals. But part of it is the rest of society was fine with it because we assumed, oh, well, it's gangsters, we don't care. Why are you protecting gangsters? Why you care about the quality of life of gangsters? It's like, because every now and then something like this happens where now we're questioning innocence and guilt and it's not obvious that it's a gangster. So now what? Right? And to me, this is not a, oh my gosh, how could they do this, these poor people? No, to me it's that, okay, now we have an example of it not being the normal stereotype. All of a sudden now, since it's not the obvious normal stereotype, we're starting to question a little bit. Well, what happens if we kind of go even beyond that and break that mold? Then what are we going to do? Right? And I think that's the one in a Guy Griffith, of all people, you know, a former army man, had to give him credit for that. Former army man understands some of these political dimensions that for whatever reason, sitting politicians at the time, even the past administration, didn't fully understand, and we get where we get. Is that it? Is that all the comments we have for today? Oh. Yeah, that's it. All right, sorry. Seem to have a minor technical difficulty. That's more my fault. That's not our guy's fault. So with that said, thanks, Chris, for joining me once again. I don't know if you have any last words.
Well, no.
I'll be quick though.
No.
All right. Thanks to the commenters. This is one of those things where, again, like I said, I by default, I should be saying let's not speculate and let's not get things out of hand. But at the same time, we don't live in a vacuum. So this is one of those catch-22s where, you know, how you assess it, I can't fault people. But I'll just say this. Whatever we do, we have to do it responsibly and not just say, let's tear the thing apart. Because that sentiment of wanting to see change could lead to very irresponsible behavior very quickly.
Could I wish somebody happy birthday?
Of course.
Yeah. Happy 10th birthday to a young lady by the name of Ara Miriam. She turned 10 Saturday. Okay. She thinks she's 21. She's not. She thinks she just turned 21. She's not. You know, behave yourself. You're 10. Happy birthday.
What I find interesting is, in the same breath, you have very young children that either want to be older or they are legitimately more mature than their peers. Yeah. And then you have the actual 21-year-olds that's like, you're not 16, grow up. All right, folks, let's talk about WESN. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, remember your allegiance to the public and to each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. And yes, don't take out your frustrations with whatever random police officer you might interact with today. Let me always say that one. it's not worth it, and you might be very wrong. You might just be, you know, giving pressure to one of the good ones and you don't know, right? So with that said, stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
WESN